Hello and welcome again to Cloud Forest Vibes. I'm getting ready to do some watering here, and I was trying to figure out something to show you guys, and I tried to shoot one thing and it didn't go well. I need to get myself more organized before I do that topic for you guys, I think. But what I have come up with is some new blooms, and one's a Dendrobium, one's a Dendrobium. So I figured what we'd do is an all things Dendro update. So I'm going to show you guys, first and foremost, my new blooms, because that's the whole reason we're here. And then I'm going to go through a little mini tour, well, not a mini tour, I'm going to go through a full tour of all things Dendro that I grow. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I think that it's going to be pretty interesting. I've got 3 different genus that we're going to go over today. So here we go. So first and foremost, I wanted to start off with some blooms. Like I said, that's the reason we're all here. This guy started opening its blooms a couple days ago. They were pretty slow to get going. But this is Dendrobium Microbulb. Oh, the light's terrible. This is a Sri Lankan species. At least that's how it was sold to me. Oop, I cannot get a good shot. But it's a beautiful little miniature. Put my hand up there. Real small. Pretty delicate white blooms with a hot pink, hot pink marking in the lip. I don't know if you can see that or not. But I'll put some pictures up. It's pretty tough to get on film here. It's really small. That is Dendrobium Microbulb. It is a, let's see, it's an intermediate grower. It likes a drier winter. I don't let it fully dry out. I do give it moisture, but I don't give it heavy waterings. I don't give it heavy feedings. And once you notice that it's pretty well stopped growing, it might have a flush of roots, but that's just about it. So I do grow it pretty moist when it's in growth. Once it starts to push the buds out. This time well, this spring is when it pushed its buds out. This is its first time blooming for me, so yeah, it pushed them out. It's been going pretty slowly. It took a while, but I hope they also hang in there a long time. Usually when the spikes take a while to form, sometimes that means that the plants actually hold onto their flowers a little bit better. So it's the last time we'll look at it. Dendrobium, oh gosh, terrible lighting. Dendrobium Microbulb. Stepping back a little bit, this is not a Dendrobium. Oh gosh, my lighting is just foul. Hang on a minute, guys. Let's see if this works better. Excuse my mess. So yeah, it's a whole lot better. So this is Dendrobium Gras or Gracile, and it just started opening up 2 of its 4 spikes, and the light's not going to cooperate here either. Stop moving. Okay. Awesome job filming. Okay, this isn't going to work. I'll try here. Alright, so I'm basically going to have to lay down on the floor to do this, I think. Is this going to be any better? No. Well, that sucks. Alright, I'm not going to be able to film this here that well, so this is Dendrobium Gracile. I'm just going to go ahead and go with Gracile. I have a different clip of this plant. I'm just going to go ahead and insert this because I cannot get a good shot on this here, but it is definitely in bloom, and I'll put some pictures up too. Beautiful new bloom for me. I also grow this intermediate kind of on the warm side. I keep it moist at all times. I have it mounted. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 new growths, all of which have spikes. The spike emerges with the new growth, so it gets about 2-3 inches long. Once the leaf starts opening up, the spike comes out right behind it, and I feed it just like I would a dendrobium, same levels, about 200 parts per million. This one has been getting jacks for the fall when I had it, and then not a whole lot going on in the winter until it started growing again. And once it started growing again, I started giving an MSU with a little bit of calcium nitrate, and it seems to have responded well. So those are my 2 in bloom at the moment. Both are new blooms, first time bloomers for me. And yeah, let's go ahead and start off the Dendro tour. So our next orchid, this is a Dendrobium aberrans, and I just got this about a month ago from Andy's. It looks like it was grown on from seed, or a seedling, and it's a healthy little plant. I need to get off this stick, but I'm going to wait until I see some new growth. It does not have any signs of new growth yet, so we're going to wait till we see that before we do anything. I got this over the winter from Tarzan Group. This sad looking thing is a Dendrobium unicum, and that is how they look. They pretty much look dead. But it finally is growing a new growth. So it is just coming back into growth there. This silly thing has no roots, and it tried to spike, and I cut all the spikes off, the buds at least. So I wanted to push the plant, I wanted to get the strength back into it, and that is exactly what we've done. So it has pushed on 1 new growth. I'm hoping for another, but we'll just have to see how that goes. Stepping over one more, let's get a better angle on this. This plant is Dendrobium rotostictum, and as you can see, it's got 1 really honking awesome new growth coming up the back. It's got another strong one here coming up the back, and one that it pushed on pretty recently that's also doing really well. Good sized leaves, good leaf jump from the ones that came with, and it is also growing another new growth down there. So that'll be 4 new growths. And I had this in bloom over the winter. You guys might know, but this is an amazing looking bloom. I will put a pop-up of this. They like it intermediate to warm. Like I said, I do go down to about, I don't know, 57 or 58 degrees. Oh gosh. Getting really out of focus. I go down to about 57 or 58 degrees in the winter time for certain plants, but this one really doesn't seem to mind it too much. I give it high humidity. I do let it dry out a bit more in the winter, but I always keep it moist but not wet. You see the roots are scattered on a little bit of moss, and that is just how it likes to grow for me. It's a little bit higher maintenance, but it's absolutely worth it. So stepping over here, we have Dendrobium Cinelli. Roger has an awesome one of these in bloom right now. I have not been so fortunate. I have these little miniature growths that came out when I got it, and then one of them pushed out a better sized growth last year. It just dropped its first leaf last week. This is everyone's favorite. You can really see the fuzz. It's backlit right now, so you can really see how hairy this plant truly is. It is awesome. I'm hoping it does well this year. It does have some roots now, and it has attached to its mount, so I'm just hoping it's a good year for this. This is Dendrobium Canaliculitum. This is an Australian dendrobium. It grows with a really pronounced moist dry cycle. Oh my gosh, I'm doing terrible with this today. It's got 2 new growths, one in the back, one right here, and it did well through the winter. I gave it a really dry winter rest. This is another rester, and I did not get blooms, but I'm hoping that I can push this thing on well. I'm giving it lots and lots of light and a pronounced wet dry cycle. It gets watered the same way you would a Tolumnia. Moistened down every day and dry by the day's end for sure, if not maybe by lunchtime. So I'm going to go down here. This is a relatively new acquisition. I got this about a month or two ago, and I put it on the mount immediately. This is a Dendrobium Tetragon seedling, and as you can see, we've already got our first new growth. We've got some new roots growing. Oh, the root tip died. I wonder what happened there. But we do have some nice new roots growing. Root tip there. And I believe I saw the beginnings of a new growth back here on the other one as well, but I cannot see it now. Anyhow, but that's Dendrobium Tetragonum. That's a new one to me. I saw Lynn Smith had one. I've seen them a lot through the winter, and I just had to get one. It has such a cool spidery looking flower, and yeah, I'm hoping I can grow it well. So moving over here, this is Dendrobium Dicyoides, creeping version. I just gotta keep going down for this one because it just keeps on going. When I bought this plant, I was told it only gets about a 12-inch cane, but that cane is much longer than 12 inches. And it has really nice pink flowers. Bloomed this over the winter as well. They do not last very long. It's a clustering type, but it has just exploded into new growth last fall. They push on through the winter. These were growing when I got the plant. They were very short. This grew on all the way through the winter. So I think these have a 2-year cycle. I have almost had this plant for 2 years, so we're gonna see, but no sign of a terminal leaf yet on these canes. So this is Dendrobium Dicyoides. This is another New Guinea one. It grows moist. It does not have a rest period, and it really appreciates good feedings. I mean, it just grows and grows and grows. I water this whole plant. I try not to get it in the tips, of course, but I spray this whole plant down when I water it. Look at all those roots. So this one is, forgive me, Dendrobium Howegianum. Another New Guinea Dendrobium. You're probably seeing a trend here. I love them. And this plant grows kind of odd. It looks kind of like onions or something. Chives. I mean, it doesn't really have a pronounced pseudobulb. What you see is what you get. Or cane, I mean. I mounted this over the winter. It did bloom. I will put pop-up of that bloom as well. And it's growing roots. We pushed out this new growth in the back. That furthest back growth you see right there is a new growth, and it is getting up to size. So we'll see. I'm wondering if that won't keep growing, but it's new to me as well, so I don't know a whole lot about it. Treat it like a Latoria. Keep it moist. Keep it relatively warm, and it'll be happy. So this here. Oh, I'm gonna move over again. This here is a Dendrobium Lotogesii variegated. Notice the variegated margins on the leaves. Beautiful plant. It's got a very large growth coming from down here. It's got one cakey, which is to be expected from these guys, coming up at the very tip. And I just noticed the other day, I don't know if you guys can see this or not. Let's get this over here. Deep down in there. See that little speck of green? I believe it's got another growth forming, so that'll be 3 new growths. I got this plant, I believe, in the fall, perhaps the early winter, and I did push it on. It flowered for me this spring. I will put a pop-up up. Gorgeous blooms, fragrant blooms, but they, again, just like most resting dendrobiums, they did not last very long. So I'm hoping to grow this on to a bigger plant so it creates a little bit more of a spectacle, because frankly the blooms did not last. It's just like a Lepanthes, you get about a week out of it. So, and that's it. That wraps up all my Dendrobiums. I do have one more Dendro down here. Some of you guys might already know what it is. We're going to go ahead and swap Helwegianum down. And we will bring this guy up. Now this is Dendrophylax Sallii crossed with Dendrophylax lindinii. And this is a leafless ghost orchid. No leaves, just roots, and they have a really, really neat flower. I did a quickie video on this, but you see my root tips are coming along strong. It is growing, 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 and that is fantastic. I'm more excited about these roots than I have ever been on, I think, any other plant. So, a little bit more information on Dendrobiums. In the main, I'm getting just scorched by this fogger now. Oh, anyhow, let me get out of here. Good God. Cloud Force 5s, right? Okay. This is awful angle. We're just going to have to eat it. We're going to have to deal with it. So, a little bit more information on Dendrobiums. There are 2 types in the main. There's more than that, so don't get me wrong. But in the main, there's 2 types for care. There are resting type Dendrobiums, and there are Dendrobiums that do not require a rest. Now, I have both types. I have just recently gotten into the resting types, but don't be discouraged by them. I think that temperatures are probably the most important thing. I am not a Dendrobium professional or professional Dendrobium grower. Watch Rogers Orchids if you want a professional Dendrobium grower. I am just learning. I tend to stick to the Latoria types, or the constant growers, or the ones that grow more dry in winter but not necessarily full resting type Dendrobiums. The only difference is, again, one, you're going to keep moist and feed year round, or at least keep moist year round, and the other type, you are going to virtually not water from around October until around February, but it's all going to depend on your climate and the way the plants grow. Again, there's a lot of debate on this. Watch Rogers Orchids. I tend to lean more in the direction of him and his school of thought with resting type Dendrobiums, but they are not, they shouldn't be feared to grow, just like any other orchid. So the reason I brought these out to begin with was to water them and feed them, so I'm going to do just that. I'm going to go ahead and set you up on my little tripod, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them now that we've done a run through of the different species I grow and the blooms, and we're going to go ahead and take a deeper look at how I care for these orchids. Okay, so we're back. These are some of my non-resting types. So I want to go over these with you guys first, because though they get pretty much the same care throughout the growing season, they do get different care in the winter and the colder months. These would like it to stay, springtime temperatures all year long. They would love 78 degrees or so, 76 degrees during the day. They do not like it to get too hot. They kind of like true intermediate temperatures. They want moisture, but they do not want to be soggy. If you keep the base of these plants too moist, they will rot and they will die. This plant came to me with no roots. This is probably my best Dendrobium besides my Dicyoides right here. This is the Rotostictum again, and it is a Latoria type Dendrobium. So is the Aberrans. This is not a Latoria, but this comes from New Guinea as well. So does the Dicyoides. This is the only oddball in this group. This is the Microbulbin. Now, I don't know if technically this should be in this group or not. I've heard some say that this takes a resting period or a much drier winter. which all I do is I let it dry out gently. It's about there right now, between waterings. In the winter time, I'll let it stay dry for an extra day. So technically, it's a drier in winter, but I do not keep this plant wet. In the summertime or springtime when it's growing or when it's blooming, I feel that this plant absolutely needs to stay moist. So it's not crispy dry, it's just on the verge of dry, and that's when I like to water it most times. Same thing with the aberrans. It's still a little bit moist to the touch. The Dicyoides is still a bit moist to the touch, not crispy dry, and both of these plants are still moist. Now, you'll notice the roots are white, so they are not super sogged down, they're not really, really wet, and that is how these plants pretty much like to stay all the time. Now, my feeding regimen for these, it varies. I use mostly MSU fertilizer with these. I do 200 parts per million to 220 parts per million. In the winter time, I'll go down to about 120 to 150 parts per million. They're not growing all that fast. Since they like the warmer weather, they do slow down just a bit, but I do not take it too cold for them to actually stop growing. So they always get feed. Toward the end of the summertime, I will switch over and I will start feeding jacks, and I will put the formula up on the screen if I can remember, but I will feed jacks fertilizer from the end of summer all the way through the fall, right before it gets cool, to toughen these plants up. They're not quite growing as fast. I supplement in with the jacks calcium nitrate, and that will bring the nitrogen levels back up a bit. So they're still feeding, but I really do believe that the added, potassium and everything else in the jacks fertilizer really helps them toughen up through the winter. And that's why I don't feel like I have issues taking my temperatures down to around 57 or 58 degrees. I mean, these plants do not have cold damage. I've got some old leaves that are getting ready to go, but these are the new growths. They are stonking, they are big. This is bigger than anything else that's on this plant right now. And I am fully expecting this plant, this rotostictum, to keep pushing on like that. And I am just hoping that we can see more blooms from it in the future, because it was really spectacular. The aberrans, I'm going to treat the exact same way. It's smaller, but if you'll notice, the bulbs, the canes are very similar. This is just a little guy. Looks like a unifoliate. This is a bifoliate, meaning it has 2 leaves. This only has 1. But they're going to grow in the exact same manner. They're both Latoria type dendrobiums. Even though this is not classed as a Latoria, this Helwegianum also comes from New Guinea. It likes to stay moist, and it has very fine roots that don't mind clinging to stuff. There's some roots down in this moss as well, but they will come out here as long as you keep your humidity up. High humidity is a key for a lot of these type of dendrobiums. They come from an area that is constantly washed with a sea breeze or constantly washed with clouds, and they just seem to really really appreciate high humidity. All the New Guinea species that I grow. So this is the latest growth back here. It's pushing on really nicely. It just stopped blooming. This thing was in bloom for about 4 months, maybe even close to 5, and it was just a delicate little pink flowers, a slight fragrance to them. It does like bright light, but it does like to stay moist. It really appreciates the high humidity. So having that be the trend for all these, we're going to go ahead and keep them moist. Dicyoides is the same way. They really are moisture loving plants. So like I said before, I wet this whole plant down. I'm careful of the growing tips, but I like to spray them down with clean water, give them a bit of a flush every single time I water them. I'm not afraid to get the plants a little bit moist. I just don't like to get the tops of the plants. I don't top water any of these because I feel like if you get that part wet, you're in trouble. But I like to make sure that the base gets nice and moist. All the roots turn green if they're exposed. I like to keep the moss dripping wet if I'm watering. And make sure that it saturates really good. I'll spray the mount down, make sure any roots that are attached bare to this mount get really nice and wet. And make sure everything's nice and wet before I add my fertilizer. So this right here, what we're feeding with is 200 parts per million of MSU and 50 parts per million of calcium nitrate. And we're going to go ahead and just drown everything in this right now. One for good luck. I use a baster, I use a gallon jug. Yeah, it helps you kind of get in behind the plants and tactically water so you're not getting everything wet. Especially when you're growing on a mount, I think it's very helpful. And that's it. Everything's been pre-moistened. I'm not overly concerned about getting any root burn. And that is why I do that. That's why we spray everything down with clean water every single time. It also gives it a little bit of a flush, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're replenishing the nutrients. Don't be scared to flush your orchids very frequently. I'm one of the school of thought that it's better to keep bringing fresh nutrients in, even if you're taking nutrients away, than let anything sit and build up and get nasty and risk anything happening to your wonderful roots. So that's it for this round. I'm gonna go grab the next batch and we're gonna take a look at them. Alright, so we're back again with our next round of plants. This is the dry resters. I only have 2, and the much drier in winter type. These 2 are Australian Dendrobiums. This is the Cinelli, which, where is it from? Thailand. I do not consider this a resting orchid, but I do not consider this, in my environment at least, a continuous growth orchid. It definitely has its season, but we're going to get into that here in just a moment. And this is the unicum, and this here is the Dendrobium variegated. So these 2 are undoubtedly resting type Dendrobiums. These 2 are special because they do not get water, except for just a slight misting, perhaps, like you would be simulating a dew. You can fog them or something like that, but you're not going to drench these. You're not going to give them their ingrowth or vegetative growth waterings until they come back into vegetative growth, until they start producing new growth, buds, something like that, before you start the watering cycle back aggressively like you would be doing around this time of year. In the winter, the biggest key to most of these getting to bloom, or being able to bloom I should say, is a nighttime temperature drop that is pretty substantial. So you're going to want to get these down into, most of them, the high 50s, some of them the low 50s, some of them even lower than that. I do not grow that cool. These get down to about 57 degrees, and I did not have an issue blooming this one, though I haven't had it long enough to really take credit for the blooms. This next winter is going to be my real test for this one and this one. They both tried to bloom this spring. I let this one bloom successfully. If I haven't already put a pop-up up, I will do that now. Absolutely stunning flower. That's the Lotus Jessii. And the unicum, the silly thing, tried to bloom, but I don't feel that the plant is strong enough at this time, so I want to let it do its thing. And like I said before, I nipped off the flower buds, or the spikes, whatever you'd like to call it, and pushed on a new growth, and I'm hoping for a second off this cane, but only time's going to tell. I'm happy with one. I would love to see 2. The drier in winter is just that I let these fully dry out between waterings. I might even let them sit for several days between waterings while staying crispy dry. I mean crispy dry. None of which are right now. They are all growing. This one I'm trying to provoke a bit, but again, this is a little bit special. We're going to talk about him last. These two grow pretty dry. They're both Australian dendrobiums. If you think about the Australian continent and what happens, it's very much a monsoon season in parts of it, and very much a very dry season in parts of it. So these get watered pretty well when they're in growth. They get fed very well when they're in growth, and when they're not, they don't. They get watered much less frequently, and they barely get fed, if at all, in the times that they're not actively growing or pushing up roots. That leaves us with Cinelli. Now, I'm hesitant to give any advice because I do not grow this plant well. I grow this plant better now than I ever have, but it's only because I've watched people like Roger and gotten advice from really good growers about how to kind of grow this guy. So it likes to be moist, it likes to grow, it likes warmth. It's from Thailand. It likes very high humidity. It doesn't like to stay soggy by any means, but again, I don't grow it very well. I just grow it better than I have, so I am not the one to take advice from. I just know that I treat it virtually the same as I do one of the Australian dendrobiums, which is why I kind of have it in that category. It grows very much like one of them, at least for me. That's how I've had my most success. It might keel over and die tomorrow. It's a very fussy orchid. It's a very tough orchid to grow, but it is growing, so that says something. They get the exact same feed regimen as I would give any other dendrobium. I give them a high nitrogen feed like MSU when they're in growth, pushing up like this very frequently. I might even water, I might even fertilize them every other growth because they have a whole lot of growing to do before they go dormant. So whereas I might keep with the Latorias a consistent feed schedule and a consistent feed, level for most of the year, these are only going to get high feed when they're in growth, and they get started off immediately at around 180 parts per million MSU when they're starting to grow, and then once they start to grow a little bit heavier or producing roots or multiple growths, or start growing faster like this where it's starting to just take off like a rocket, I will start bumping the level up. I will add in calcium nitrate from maybe 40 parts per million to about 60 parts per million, in addition to the base of about 180 to 200 parts per million MSU. Towards the end of the summertime, towards the end of the fall, whenever I notice that they're starting to get ready to slow down, or the temperatures or whatever are getting low enough to start thinking about getting ready to rest plants, I will switch over to a Jax with calcium nitrate added, and I will start tapering off the calcium nitrate that I add to it and letting the Jax extra boost in phosphorus and potassium and things like that really help strengthen it up for the winter time. And that's it. Regular CalMag, regular kelp feedings, regular flushes, just like with any other plant. I treat all my orchids the same in that regard, and that's how I take care of these. So let's get on with it. Again, more of the same. They're going to get sprayed down with clean filtered water, nothing in it. Now I do this for another reason, and that is because when moss is a little bit drier, it's really not that absorbent, as crazy as that sounds. If you get your moss wet, it will absorb a lot faster, and you'll have a lot less runoff. You'll have your nutrients and whatever you're trying to give to your plant seep into the moss and cling better and give those roots a chance to grab onto it. Now the Cinelli is not growing actively, so I'm going to go ahead and take this out right now. That is all that plant is going to get because it's not in growth. Like I said, it just dropped a leaf. This and this are probably going to go very soon, and until we see any signs of growth on this, it gets misted, so it's a little bit moist, once every couple days. Now, these are going to get fed the same exact way. we're gonna get a baster. We're gonna drench them with our feed, and that's again 200 parts per million MSU and 50 parts per million, yeah, around 50 parts per million calcium nitrate. It's not an exact science, so you really don't have to worry about getting everything too precise. Somewhere between 180 and 250 parts per million with your supplements and everything should be just fine. If your ppm levels are lower, feed more frequently. If they're not, then you can get away with once a week. Like I said, I am also supplementing with CalMag, Kelp Max, some Epsom salt sometimes, calcium nitrate. It's got a lot going on. That's gonna wrap up all the Dendrobiums. Let me grab the two other guys and I'll be back here. We'll just do them together and wrap this video up. I'm back for the last time. We have the Dendrocolum and the Dendrophylax. Now, they both get very different care, but I figured I'd go over them because I had them out, and yeah, we'll do a little bit of care on these as well. So, starting with the Ghost Orchid, the Dendrophylax, I'll get you a nice shot of this guy as well because he's just awesome. Growing well. These come from Florida. Well, the Lindinii comes from Florida. The Sallii comes from, I believe, the Dominican Republic. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's true. And they just like to basically get a daily spritz. Again, I always spritz it down with clean water first. I haven't fed this guy the high test. I feed it with very low feed, think Masdevallia or something like that. 80 to about 110 parts per million. I have only given this guy MSU so far. I have not had him very long, so since it's in growth, it's gotten some kelp, it's gotten CalMag, and it's gotten MSU very regularly with very regular mistings and flushes, because I feel like they're gentle. They need to be cared for gently. They are very finicky orchids. So having that said, it got fed 2 days ago, so we're going to go ahead and give this CalMag at 50 parts per million. Just drown it. And we're going to give it just a little shot of Kelp Max. That's it, just a shake. Right now it's getting intermediate to warm temperatures. I haven't had this over the winter yet. Don't know if it's going to be an issue. It might have to go into the small tank, but we're going to have to see. So it does get around that cold in Florida and around the Caribbean. Sometimes it's rare, but it does happen. So I'm thinking it's going to be okay, but only time will tell. Right now it's growing well. I'm super thankful, and that is how I feed it. It gets extremely high humidity, 80 to 90% really, 80 to 85% in my grow area at all times. It stays rather moist, and it gets flushed very frequently. That's how I care for it at the time. It's getting bright light, it's diffused light. I have 30% shade cloth as a curtain over this window in front of my greenhouse, and it gets bright artificial light in the afternoon and evenings, the same as I would give a Tolumnia orchid, but a little bit lower down, so just a little bit less, I guess. I'm trying to think of what else grows in that region, but maybe Brassia, something like that. It gets bright light, but it is not full strength sun. It never gets the full sun except for, I guess, dappled or scattered in the morning for only about 2 hours. So that wraps up the light requirements. Other than that, I don't know what else to talk about. So I haven't had it long enough. That's all I know. That's how I give it. That's the environment that I give it, and we'll move on. So the Dendrocolum here, similar story. I haven't had it for that long. It's kind of hard to shoot. It's a little bit awkward. Some mounts can be, but all I can tell you is I treat it virtually the same as I do the first round of Dendrobiums that we looked at. This never dries out. I let it get almost dry. It's spongy still. You can feel moisture in there, but it is not wet by any means. It is just barely damp, and this is the perfect time to water this plant if you're keeping it mounted. I do the same thing again. I get in there, I spray it with clean water because I have a pretty good amount of moss on this mount, and once it gets a little bit dry, it does act a little bit hydrophobic. It doesn't like to soak up the water quite as fast. So once I do that, this gets the same fertilizer we were giving the Dendrobiums, 246 parts per million total, MSU with cal nitrate right now because it is growing. And in the fall this year, I plan on treating it the same as I would the rest of the plants. It's going to get switched over to Jax. It's going to start getting calcium nitrate supplemented into that at a higher level. That'll be tapered off to hopefully strengthen it up for the winter and let it do its thing. But this is one of our ones that's first just barely coming into bloom. And yeah, that's how I grow it. It gets the same conditions, intermediate conditions. This one does not like all the light. I grow this orchid under my top shelf, so it gets bright shade, but this one I grow fairly shady compared to a lot of plants. This lives over near some of the bulbophyllums, near the Mormolica, near the Phalaenopsis, and it really does seem to appreciate the shade. So that's it. That's all I really know about it. Again, very new to me. This is my first time blooming the plant. I can't even really fully take credit for these, even though the growths and everything did form in my care. I feel like I need another year to really be able to tell you more about this plant. But it likes shade, bright shade. It likes lots of humidity. It likes to stay moist at all times, and it doesn't mind that moderate level of feed. And it's a beautiful plant. The flowers are charming. So that's it. That's going to conclude my Dendro everything, Dendro tour and care guide, tips, whatever you want to call it, video. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I really appreciate you guys for watching and supporting. So thank you guys. I can't wait to see you next time. I hope this video wasn't too long. I know it probably got a little bit rambly, but thank you so much. And until next time, happy growing.